Hello and welcome to Made in Science, the official podcast of the University of Stuttgart. In today's episode, our guest is Professor André Bächtiger. He is professor of political theory and empirical research on democracy at the Institute of Social Sciences here at the University of Stuttgart. His special research topics are deliberative democracy and political participation. Wishing you a very good day and welcome to our podcast.
I'm very pleased and honored to be here.
I would like to talk with you about similarities and differences between Mars and Earth in your research, the concept of democracy and the global South, and how a minor subject can sometimes become a major subject. Professor Bächtiger, you are the first social scientist at the University of Stuttgart to be awarded an ERC advanced grant by the European Research Council. In the project Designing Democracy on Mars and Earth, exploring citizens' democratic preferences in a deliberative and co-creative design, you investigate the future of democracy, its values, and in particular, its institutional architectures in the 21st century. And you're also looking at Mars. Now, that needs an explanation. Please, can I ask you to tell us more about the project and perhaps your thesis as well?
The project started something like 20 years ago when I, as a Swiss citizen, asked myself, what would citizens do when they could rebuild democracy on Moon? And my idea was they're probably just going to do exactly the same, a copy-paste of Switzerland on the moon. And this idea stayed long. And then a couple of years ago, I thought maybe moon is not a particularly good metaphor. We really need to go to Mars because Mars has also become a colonization project. And the idea is, what would citizens think about democracy and its designs when they could rebuild democracy or governance from scratch, like on a green field, and just say, there are no constraints. Let's build democracy anew. And how would that look like? Maybe it's exactly the same than on Earth, or it's something different, or something, a sort of a mix of something new and something old.
Are there already some early, perhaps for you, surprising results in that project?
Yes, they are. And I was surprised because citizens, and many people think when you ask citizens about democratic architectures, they have simply no clue, which is not true. They have quite a good understanding what they want. And this was a little surprise because they just don't want direct democracy or representative democracy. They want a sort of a mix on Mars. And it's a sort of something what we call a mixed model or a blended model, where you say there's not one specific main institution, but a sort of a combination of different institutions, representation, but also citizen forums, expert input. So citizens want a sort, what we also call a multi-cameral way of doing governance. Not one chamber, not one institution should take the lead, but several. So this is one result we got on Mars, and this is miles apart from the status quo we have today. Moreover, citizens also want a lot of protections because they fear, and I think Mars is a good example for that, with Elon Musk wanting to colonize Mars, that you need protections, that you need to safeguard against political capture of someone. So you want to have a lot of oversight and a lot of checks and balances. So when we compare that, what they want to reform on Earth, well, on Mars, it's just a bit more of a multi-cameral model of governance and more of protections. And I think it's surprising because a lot of people would say, well, you want a simple, straightforward model. No, on Mars, you want a complex model of governance.
And back on Earth, you look at different countries in your research. Among them are the United States, Germany, India, Brazil, the Philippines, perhaps as well. So how do you conduct your research in these countries, and also to what results with the Earth Group?
Yes, we do a kind of a dual stage. We have a dual stage approach. So first of all, we want just to have a sort of an agenda setting of citizens. So we want to have a lot of citizens, 5,000 per country, who give us just some kind of ideas how it basically should look like. And then in a second stage, we want to let citizens deliberate about more concrete proposals. So if you say you want a mix of citizen participation and representative democracy, the question is, how should that really look like? And we do exactly the same in the different countries and see a bit whether there are differences between the global north and the global south, or if there is a sort of a human general wish of how to design democracy. We were surprised when you look at the United States and Germany, two completely different countries with also different challenges. The results are strikingly similar. There are some differences, but basically Americans and Germans have similar ideas how a good system of governance should look like.
And you mentioned the global south. When you look at that particular group of countries and that you also consider in your research, what can we learn from the global south about democracy? What does your project learn from the global south and democracy?
I think much more than conventional research on democracy has ever thought. And I give one example which has just fascinated me. This is Botswana, because Botswana is not a country that a lot of people know. There has been a dominant party for decades, now de-elected. But this dominant party, that's an unusual model, always did consultation processes with villages. So they went there and asked citizens, what do you want on specific policies? And that's a sort of a consultation model, which we also sometimes do have a bit in the global north, but not in that extensive form. And as our research shows, that's exactly what modern citizens in the 21st century, also in the global north, seem to want from a good system of governance. So I think we already have templates in the global south how we could democracies do, or how we could do democracy better in the global north.
Obviously, democracy is not a very stable concept, but there's a certain dynamics related to it. To be even more specific, what factors constitute or influence democracy and its changing or varying paths or aspects?
I think what is really the sort of factor behind different visions of what democracy is the sort of dominant discourse. And if we, for instance, go back to the 18th century, for a lot of contemporary citizens and thinkers, well, a sort of a representative democracy as we have it now as the standard model was not democracy. They thought more of ancient Athens and direct forms of citizen participation as democracy. The other model was more a sort of a republican model. Now, in the 20th century, the dominant discourse was, well, what is good democracy? That's free and fair elections. Now we're learning that maybe democracy is free and fair elections, of course, but it could be more. It could really be enriched with citizen participation forms and all the things that sometimes got a bit forgotten. So it's also, I think, a discourse what democracy is. But I still find it surprising. We asked German and American citizens, what comes to mind if you think about democracy? What is it? And we get very standard answers. So it's rule of the people, it's freedom, it's equality. So I think a lot of citizens are still very much constrained by that dominant discourse. Nonetheless, we also see some rifts and shifts. Younger citizens, for instance, do not emphasize freedom as much as older generations did. So there are shifts, and I think democracy is a constantly evolving and changing concept. So saying what is democracy and we have a fixed definition is really besides the place. It can change over time, and it's also the wishes and desires of citizens what it actually is and what it should be.
These days, against this background and the dynamics that you have described, what are some of the challenges for democracy?
I think one of the key challenges are communication challenges, also in the transformation, the digital transformation of the public spheres. And what is kind of stunning, problematic, amazing is we have a lot, and we had a lot of authoritarian leaders. And the kind of traditional authoritarian leader was a fear dictator. Today we have spin dictators. And a lot of authoritarian populists have copy-pasted, have just along the playbook of these spin dictators, meaning that you just tell fake news stories and try to manipulate audiences in novel ways, also using new technologies. And I think this really changes the democratic landscape. So the traditional idea that you have media reporting on what's going on in politics, that's a time long gone. It's really about that people like Donald Trump directly influence people, have their own channels, unmediated, unbounded, and can just tell anything they want. And I think this really changes. And I think that's where we also, if we want to make democracy safe for the future, we not only have to think about the institutions, but also the communicative landscape, what I would call the discursive infrastructure of societies. And this has massively changed and sometimes also needs to be re-energized and rebuilt.
And against this background, what about the public discourse? Has the quality, is perhaps not the best word to phrase this here, but the level of public discourse changed against what you just described, against the self-chosen media by those who want to influence, or is this a concept that needs to catch up with?
Public discourse has changed. And for instance, if you look at parliamentary discourse with novel actors, novel players like right-wing populist parties entering the scene, public discourse gets different, or political discourse gets different. So it gets more simple, it gets less respectful, and that of course also infects other parties to do exactly the same. But the problem is, in my view, is that our world has become more complex. So in a way, language, the way how we explain politics got more simple. On the other hand, we would need a certain level of complexity to navigate the contemporary problems. And this is a real interesting gap, because if citizens think, because political talk is so simple, well, then also everything should be simply made, should be simply reconstituted. But it's not. And then in a way, this creates a sort of a strange image how we can change politics. If we would use a little more complex language, we could also say you cannot just change the world so easily, enhance tariffs, and then hope that everything will be better. It won't.
In 2016, so about 10 years ago nearly, you did an experiment in Germany. You found high consistency in democratic basic principles. Your research says that there was a high convergence between what the government did and what the citizens expected it to do at the same time. What do you think would be the outcome of the same experiment today?
I think probably the same, but I have to say we were quite surprised in 2016 because there's a strong trend in general political science to think that citizens have no clue when it comes to what they want from democracy. So we should see a lot of inconsistency between the principles you defend and the sort of designs you would choose. But that was not the case. And in our latest research, we see exactly the same. If you ask, for instance, citizens, why do you want a mixed model? You could say, yeah, because I didn't know better. It's just like Lego playing. I like all the kind of different colors and that is colorful. So that's why I like it. No, they have distinct reasons why they want a mixed model. And this is surprising because we have this image of citizens as idiots which need to be guided. No, that's not true. So my expectation and also the result is citizens are much smarter than we think. However, and this is for me, one of the key insights in the last years, well, you could say many citizens are not the smartest cookies. What makes us smarter cookies are systems, is the sort of infrastructure we're living in. If you get good information under good conditions, then suddenly you see the world in good ways. If you have a context which is very different, well, then you are maybe not the smartest cookie. So it may be not so much on us as individuals, it's more the sort of systems that make us smarter or less smart cookies.
Here at the university level, at the University of Stuttgart, you are very active in IRIS. IRIS is the interchange forum for reflecting on intelligent system, and it is a platform designed to stimulate and develop and promote critical reflection on intelligent systems and their impact on society. In IRIS, is there currently for you a special focus that you bring to the discussion, that you bring to the table there?
I think for me, first of all, IRIS is a platform which takes this systemic view very seriously. And I always loved also the motto of the university. It's about intelligent systems, not about intelligent individuals. And I think my democracy project really plays into that. I do remember a little anecdote a couple of years ago when the University of Stuttgart first applied to become Excellency University. So there was a little committee, and then the question was, what is an intelligent system? And I just said, well, political systems can also be intelligent. And one of the committee members said, what a stupid answer. Political systems are never intelligent. I would say today, no, we know better how that could look like. And I think IRIS is a trigger also to think about AI and all these kind of revolutionary and disruptive technologies, how that comes together. And what I would want to bring to IRIS in the future is maybe saying we could design platforms also to make our university conversations more intelligent, bringing in more people, getting their ideas, but in smart and efficient ways. So one could think about designing digital AI platforms where university members could bring in their ideas for the future of the university and where we could deliberate in asynchronic, smart ways, bringing together collective intelligence. So I think IRIS is the sort of platform to think about that, but maybe also in the future to do real things that really benefit the entire university.
You have seen a number of universities in your academic career. You have been a visiting scholar in Finland, Canada, at UBC, and the United States, Chapel Hill. You have studied in Switzerland, and you are in Germany. What was the most surprising fact for you that you learned during your research stays in these countries, or perhaps just what was the most impressive one in one of the countries that you were?
The most surprising and most impressive events I had when I was a visiting scholar at Chapel Hill, because I have seen something that I have missed, and that was in the early 2000s, that I have missed in the European system. The sort of focus and dedication to a specific topic, to a marker, to something that people were really deeply involved with and which they wanted to promote. Standard European professors were all knowers. They had to know everything from electoral systems to federalism to comparative institutions. But in the United States, you had these super experts working on one topic for their whole life. And I was totally inspired because I think in today's complex academic world, you cannot master a lot of topics. And my colleague Raphael Heiberger here at the Institute of Social Sciences has once looked how to become a professor in American sociology. And one of the surprising, or maybe less surprising results is, well, you need to work on a hot topic, first of all. And second of all, you need to have a clear marker identity on that topic. Then you become a professor. If you serve too many diverse topics, you will never become one.
When you decided what to study, was that hot topic that you just mentioned, political science, was that already on your mind? Or what finally made you decide what to study?
I have to say that was a very random process because I was interested in political science, and at the University of Bern, when I wanted to enroll, and that still had to be done in physical terms in the early 90s. So I went there and said, I want to study political science. And then the lady said, well, you cannot do that as a major. And so I went home and then I thought, okay, well, what could I do as a major? So I chose history, but that was a sort of a random choice. And my big advice also to, let's say, incoming students would be find your topic along the way. I have never thought that I would work on deliberative democracy. That came along the way. And then you get the passion. Sometimes you might now think, well, I'm so interested in, let's say, in the rise of authoritarianism or the rise of Donald Trump. And that's why I want to study politics. Might be a good way to get into the topic. But as soon as you're there, you might find out that this is not the most interesting topic to study. So I would say do things along the way. And when you feel the passion for a specific topic, do it and stay on it.
In your research, you have covered many interdisciplinary aspects, I think. And I also wondered if sometimes you think I should have studied psychology because you deal a lot with human behavior. And yes, this behavior is certainly influenced by the circumstances, whether they are economic or political, ideological, whatever. But do you think psychology is something you would like to take up, should have taken up perhaps at one point?
Absolutely. Also, when I was in the United States, I was stunned where political psychology was. Also, especially in terms of methods. I mean, they are much better analyzing how to measure certain phenomena. And I think standard political science has lagged behind a lot. So if I could start anew, I probably would say start also do psychology as well. Nonetheless, I think it's not always a drama, even if you haven't studied a specific topic, because psychology is one of the, I would say, least organized disciplines in a strange way. It's very hard. Maybe I speak only of political psychology. It's very hard to find how the different kind of findings and results work together. So you get a lot of about personality, then you get about group psychology, but how personality and group psychology hangs together hasn't been studied. And this is a real issue. So sometimes you can get also confused by studying things. So I would say if you have a research problem and then you want to learn more about it, read into the literature, talk to the relevant people, deliberate with them, and then sometimes that can also do the trick. You don't have to study everything that you do. And for me, that was also true for political philosophy. I'm not a philosopher. I don't have much clue about the history of ideas, but I have a lot of friends in the business who can help me out if I have a specific questions on that. And sometimes these philosophers also become very close friends, and then you can ask everything and they will respond to everything.
You have already looked a little bit ahead, talking about the university when we mentioned IRIS and perhaps the impact that it may have to enable us to deal issues even in a more constructive way in the future. Now, the future in education. I know that you are also in contact with colleagues in education studies. This brings me to the question, what is the role of education in making citizens, young citizens, but not only, aware of basic democratic values? What changes would you recommend these days if you were to advise on implementing this kind of understanding of democracy into subjects in education?
The traditional way of let's say, educating young citizens and pupils about democracy was just a standard information package. So what is democracy? You learn about the Bundestag and Bundesrat and so on. But I think that's, of course, important as well. But I think you should rather also learn the sort of basic abilities to competently take part in a democracy. And I would say we should also get pupils to the point where they start deliberating with each other, learning the basic art of deliberation, bringing up an argument, justifying your positions, but then being criticized by others and listening to others and then reacting to others. And I think that would really help us also to safeguard democracy, because I think very often we find out in good conversations that there is something like reasonable disagreement. Others have good points too that you cannot ignore. And this is exactly what liberal democracy is all about. Then you also learn to become tolerant. But I think you need to learn the practice, not only the sort of substance. And then I think you become a good Democrat.
So the word I take along here is also conversation, that we need more of a conversation than perhaps we have at the future. How does that look in a seminar with Professor Bächtiger these days? How can we imagine your seminars, perhaps even your lectures in this regard as well?
I try to apply a Socratic method. So I'm asking all kind of crazy questions, not expecting that students have correct answers, because there are no correct answers. This is an input into discussion, an input into reflection. And I do hope that my lectures and seminars have enough time to do that, listening to what students say, and then really getting into a collective reflection process on the things. Because on a lot of things, there are no fixed answers, and we need to talk them through and think them through.
Would you rather like to live on Mars or
No.
on the moon or on Earth?
I want to live on Earth, but the goal of my project is to say, if you put yourself into a hypothetical new context, what can we bring from Mars back to Earth? And maybe say, if we just thought in an unbounded way how good governance or democracy looks like, that we could say maybe we could also reform our systems in exactly these directions. And I would want a system where you can say it's something maybe a bit like cozy democracy, where you feel at ease. And even if you get angry, you have a lot of means to, let's say, mobilize, protest, get, in a way, some input into the system. And what I said, these mixed systems might exactly provide sort of a foil to do this, having a lot of institutional means to strike back if you don't like it, but also having, in some way, not needing to trust specific persons to do it for you, but thinking more that the institutions as a system does it for you so that you can lean back and enjoy the evening.
Now we need a little more impact from you towards the end of our conversation here as well. We call this moment 7. We have collected 7 questions that we would like to ask you. Please answer each of them as shortly as possible. Moment 1. Spätzle or Maultaschen?
Spätzle.
Moment 2. One thing that you could change about the world.
Institutions.
Moment 3. What is your recommendation in the field of arts? A book, music, a movie, theater performance?
Art exhibitions. To get inspired.
Moment 4. The best advice that you have ever received is?
Occam's razor when it comes to science. So concentrate on what you really want to say and not get confused by too much detail and addition. So what is your key message? And that was a super advice that I try to follow, but I'm not always able to follow.
Moment 5. Your favorite place at the University of Stuttgart is?
My office and our Mars space. So with the project, we got an office. For all the collaborators, we call it the Mars office.
Moment 6. Please finish the sentence. If I could start all over again, I would do the following differently.
I probably would study urban planning because I think so much could be done and changed on the ground. Changing democracies is always a long shot, and all the ideas we collect in the project probably will see never the light of the day before I die. But if you are an urban planner, you can do something for many people much more immediately, even though there are, of course, spaces where the kind of democracy problem is there as well.
And moment 7. Also, please complete this sentence. Thanks to my studies, I know that
it's worthwhile living in a democracy.
Thank you very much for our conversation about democracy. We have covered the planets. We have come back to Earth, and urban studies seems to be not just a place of longing, but certainly the place where democracy happens to a large scale as well, but not only. Wishing you and your students and your colleagues the best results for your research, and most of all, wishing you personally all the very best.
Thank you very much for this very cool interview.
And to our audience, please stay tuned for our next conversations that are always based on what is made in science. My name is Wolfgang Holtkamp. Have a great podcast day. Goodbye and good talking.